Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 49 of my 2022 reads. This week I finished a bunch of really good books, so I can't wait to tell you all about them. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I read Sacred Cat Island by Harmon Cooper. This is a lit RPG novel that I heard about from Becca at Read Becca, who I will link below, and she described it as basically being like Stardew Valley in book form, and I love Stardew Valley. So I was really excited to pick this up, and it very much had those vibes. This is about two boys, two brothers. We follow the older brother, who's maybe around like 11 or 12, who move with their dad to Sacred Cat Island, where their dad's uncle had run a general store, and after he'd passed away, he'd left that to their dad. And so they're moving to this new place, and there is so much for them to explore and learn about. There's all of these cats on this island. There also seems to be some magic and some interesting things going on. They're meeting all of these villagers, and their dad is trying to set up the shop, and also noticing that there's a lot of stuff on this island that really could deal with people coming together and kind of improving it, making it better for everybody. And so it has that feel of something like Stardew Valley, where you're going in and you're building and you're exploring and you're meeting people. The lit RPG part, which kind of shows stats and like info on people in more of a table form, that is definitely really heavy in the first half of this, which made it a little bit slower to begin. But especially once you get into the heart of the story, and you're with the boys as they're exploring the island and learning about all these mysteries and learning more about the different people, and also sort of working on their own personal journeys. The main character especially is trying to become a nicer older brother to his younger brother, and also understand what's going on with their dad, that they moved out to this island. It's got a lot of heart, it's got a lot of adventure, it's got cool magic. It is just really, really a fun book. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm a little sad because Becca said that the author didn't get a ton of traction for this book, and so isn't planning to write a sequel, but I would happily pick up a sequel to this. So that makes me sad, but I think it ended in a really nice spot, and I just really enjoyed the reading experience. Then I read Your Emergency Contact Has Experienced an Emergency by Chen. This is Chen's newest poetry collection. I had read his previous collection, When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a List of Further Possibilities, and loved it earlier this year. I have a review for that, so I'll link it down below. And this poetry collection, this newest one, is, I think, even better. I loved this so much. I think this is probably just my favorite poetry collection ever. I loved this. Chen has this way with playfulness in his poetry. I think you can just see it from the titles of his poetry collections. He is so kind of creative in the way that he plays with these ideas, but also very, very vulnerable and earnest in the topics that he's talking about. I loved the way that this collection explored so many issues of being queer, of what that means for his parents who are, immigrants from China, and what that means for just dealing with things like working in West Texas, and also kind of reflecting on things like the shootings at gay clubs, and also other political issues. Like, this was written, during some of the COVID years, and the anti-Asian hate that was happening, and also just kind of reflecting on his love for his partner. And there's just so many wonderful things that he touches on in these poems. And I think that the way that he writes, the way that his poems flow, works so well for me. So I enjoyed all of these so much. I want to do a standalone review for this, but I kind of was so involved in just the reading of this that I didn't kind of have that space to do reflection as I was reading. So I need to go back through and look at the poems in order to do that. So it might take me a little while, but I loved this collection. I think that if you're into modern poetry, for sure you should pick this up. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it was just fantastic. Next, I read Into the Riverlands by Nghi, which is the third book in her Singing Hills Cycle series. I loved the first 2 books in this, The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Comes Down the Mountain. I have a review for both of those, so I will link those below. And this is just another installment of Cleric Chi, who is a non-binary cleric in this sort of very low fantasy world, going and interviewing people and getting their stories. And in this novella, Chi goes into the Riverlands, which is a place where lots of bandits exist, but also sort of lots of martial arts heroes. And they are talking to kind of people that they end up journeying with and getting their stories of the kind of the big names and the myths and things of that in this region. And so they're getting all of these different people's stories, telling them the myths that they know, telling them different facets of things. And there's a lot in this that is about that idea of how each person tells a story is different, and how there can be lots of different stories about one person, and they show different facets. So lots of ideas about storytelling in this. There's also a ton of martial arts in this. They run into bandits, of course, and there's some pretty amazing, fighting that happens and that sort of thing. So it was a kind of an adventure type story. I don't know that this necessarily had the depth of some of the other books in the series so far, but it was a fun read. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Everything is Okay by Debbie Tung. This is a graphic comic collection / novel that is really Debbie Tung reflecting on her experiences with anxiety and depression and starting therapy. I've read some of her previous collections, which are very they're arranged by theme. So she has one about loving books, and she has one about being kind of a shy person, but those are very episodic, just a panel or two talking about an experience or an interaction. This one actually had still some of those, but it threaded it all through together with this overarching narrative of her experience, realizing that she needed to go to therapy, going to therapy and kind of working through her depression. And I thought that it was really, really, really strong, much stronger just in the cohesiveness of the narrative across these comics. And I got so much out of it. I just loved reading her story and hearing her experiences and just how she was processing that depression and that, kind of avoidance of life, and the way she finally realized she needed to get therapy, and her experiences going to therapy. And it's all very, very vulnerable and earnest, and it was just really moving. And I loved also that in this collection, she always has this great illustration style with some watercolors, and she tends to do these kind of bluish gray colors. But in this one, she also introduced a lot of rainbow colors, and just this idea of her coming out of depression was very visually shown in the way that she was using the watercolors as well in this. So yeah, I thought this was fantastic. I really loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read FIYAH Literary Magazine issue number 23, edited by DeVaun Sanders. So this is a special issue that is themed. So this was the food issue, and that worked so well for me. I've read quite a different number of issues of FIYAH magazine, but I think this one is my favorite. I love food in my writing, though. I love reading stories about food. It just really, really works for me. So it makes sense that I loved this issue, but the stories in this were all so strong. I just loved the way that all of these different SFF stories kind of took the idea of food and magic, or food and science, and like how what it means to people, what food means to people and to communities and to families, and the way that it kind of brought all of that together. There was also a novelette in this, I think it was Just Desserts, that was very interesting because it took a historical figure, a man who was the chef to George Washington, and he was an enslaved person. I think his name was Hercules Posey, and it's a real historical figure, but imagines this story of him where he discovers that he can put emotions and thoughts and wishes and stuff like that into food, and the way that he uses that and sort of his journey. It was so well done. I loved that kind of historical aspect. I loved the way that it talked about food. I loved the way that it talked about all of these issues that he was being faced with, and that kind of commentary also on the founding of America and all of these sorts of things. So I thought it was really, really fantastic. And I probably will nominate this as one of the novelettes for the Hugos because I thought it was just really, really well done. So yeah, this collection as a whole, I gave 4.5 stars, which is really, really high for any anthology. I just thought these were standout stories and I really loved it. Okay, so that is everything that I read this week. It was such a fun reading week. If you guys have read any of these, or if you want to talk about them, if you're interested in them, or if you want to tell me what you've been reading this week, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.